Peace, Hotep, Ma'at, and Amun Ra. This your brother Radio One, coming back at you again with another video, Truth and Historical Reality. Okay. Now let's get it. Let's get it in. Today we're going in. Okay. Let's start this over. Yeah, it's your brother Radio One here. Peace, Hotep, Ma'at, and Amun Ra. Welcome to another video of Truth and Historical Reality. Now, the name of this video is Descendants of Pharaoh in West Africa, the Fall of Egypt. So we're going to wait a while and see if we get any participators coming in, okay? All right. Yeah. Well, this video here is, we're going to go maybe about an hour or say an hour and a half on this subject. Yeah, but this subject is definitely a ignored subject, and it's highly ignored, and someone needs to speak on it, okay? Because the truth is being covered up, truth is not being told, and it's pretty much being ignored. Okay, and as this truth is not being told, what do we have? Nothing more than a bunch of theories, lies, and cover-ups. You know, I find it funny that people always want to mention Pharaoh and get off into the Bible and talk about Egypt. But when you actually get off into the Bible and talk about Egypt, then you want to act funny. You want to go off into another field, but you want to ignore the very primary source that speaks on the matter. So, yeah, family, let's going to wait a while and see if how many participants we get in. Then in a little bit, I'm going to start my lesson. So, yeah, but let's hang in there for a while, and I'll be right back with you. All right. Okay. So I see okay, we have two people in the building. Okay. All right. But yeah, but before I get started, you know, don't you recognize the strange and funny business that's going on with this subject? You know, no one want to talk about this. You know, there's a lot of corruption in all of these other scholars. They have an agenda. You know, you go on these big platforms, they bring these pseudo scholars on here, and they only want to teach about what they want you know, what they want to put out. But the truth is not being told. Okay? If you want to deal with Pharaoh in Egypt, you have to deal with the Bible and history. Now, I made it very clear that, you know, I'm not a Bible follower. Okay? I don't worship the God of the Bible, and I don't believe I'm an Israelite. Matter of fact, I don't believe I am an Israelite. As a matter of fact, I know I am not an Israelite. But still, that doesn't change the fact that my ancestors, my African ancestors, are mentioned in the Bible. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. See, now the Hebrew Israelites, on the other hand, you know, They want to claim to be the descendants of the Israelites. You know, they follow the God of the Bible, and they claim to be a people that is not referring to them. Okay. Now, so without further ado, we're going to get started off in the lesson. So just hold on. Okay. So 5 minutes have passed. Okay. Now let's get off into it. Okay. Now, I know you heard time and time again that, and we continue to hear it, that African Americans, okay, African Americans, I know you heard it time and time again. African Americans, your ancestors come from West Africa. You have nothing to do with Egypt. Well, let's keep that word in mind. West, okay? West. I'm going to say it 5 times. The West, the West, the West, the West, the West, okay? West Africa. Yes, all eyes are on West Africa because they know this truth and they're not going to tell it. And that's why they are so desperate and so eager to tell a lie about West Africa, because they know that West Africa has the greatest history of all Africa. Yes, I'm going to say that. Now, I love my East African brothers and sisters, but I got to keep it real with you. I got to keep it real. West Africa has the greatest history of all Africa. Now, if you're not trying to connect West Africa with ancient Egypt and the pharaohs and connect it to its true origin, then you do not care for West Africa. You have a hate for West Africa. Yes. So those of you who say that West Africa has nothing to do with ancient Egypt, that's just another way of you saying that West Africa is not great enough to be connected with Egypt. So therefore, you have no respect for West Africa and you hate West Africa. Okay. So we have in the comment section May 92, 9 2001. Okay, May 9 2001. Peace and shout out, my sister. Thanks for joining in. And you're about to get a very sacred and valuable history lesson, okay, that you're not going to learn anywhere else because no one else is teaching this. Okay, this is only being taught here. Okay, everywhere else, you know, they get off into this pseudo archaeology and, you know, and quoting from 1800 and 1700 racist white scholars that's been trying to whitewash ancient Egypt and has been trying to discredit African Americans and draw us away from ancient Egypt. Yes, trying to disconnect African Americans and West Africans from ancient Egypt. And you notice that the same sources, okay, which is pseudo archaeology and the pseudo fabricated DNA studies that try to whitewash ancient Egypt, are the same sources that try to disconnect African Americans and West Africans from ancient Egypt because they don't want you to know the truth. The white man, the white racists do not want Black Americans claiming ancient Egypt because he wants to somehow try to steal it for himself, which he cannot. Okay? Now, yes, but and I noticed that there are more, okay? There are a lot of white people encouraging Black Americans, Black people, to claim Israel. Yes, You look at all these videos about the Israelites, and they say that white people are now admitting that the blacks are the true Hebrew Israelites. And believe me when I tell you, they are laughing at you. They're doing this on purpose because they know that Israel and the biblical Israelites have no history. They have no greatness. Okay, they have no historical reality. Okay, they in Israel, you have no ruins, no steles or no stelas of King David and Solomon, mentioning their greatness and their power. None. And that's why they are tricking you and encouraging you to claim Israel, because they want to deprive you of your real history, which is Egypt, ancient Egypt. Yes. Egypt is historical, okay? And Egypt is also mentioned in the Bible. See, but the Israelites, they're mentioned in the Bible, but they have nothing to prove their historical reality or their existence, okay? Now, you may find a stela or a writing that mentions Israel, and every time it mentions Israel, Israel is always being defeated, okay? But you have no stela in Israel mentioning the greatness of Israel. Where are the writings? Where are the steles of King David and Solomon saying, I am King David, the mighty king of the world. I conquered the ends of the earth. Where are those writings in Israel? They don't exist. And that's why the white racists are encouraging black people to claim this Israelite myth, okay? And as I said before, the Israelites are the only people in the Bible that have no evidence for their existence. The Persians have evidence for their existence, okay? The Persians, the Assyrians, the Cushites, the Egyptians. I mean, if it wasn't for Egypt, that the scriptures and when you look to the scriptures, and yes, if it wasn't for the facts pointing us to be the descendants of the ancient Egyptians, I mean, and I just choose randomly of who I want to be and and what people I want to claim in the Bible, which is what the Hebrew Israelites are doing. They cherry picking of who they want to be in the Bible. But if I was to do that, I would choose the Persians or the Assyrians. I would rather be a descendant of the Persians or the Assyrians instead of the Israelites, because at least the Persians and the Assyrians have evidence for their existence. Yes, there are still ruins over there in Persia of statues, cities, and images of their kings, proving their existence. But Israel, none whatsoever. No primary sources for their existence. But enough of that. Let's get off into the lesson now. Okay. Now, we're not going to be that long. Okay. We're going to try to end this about around 5:30. Now, let's get off into the lesson. We're going to deal with the downfall of Pharaoh in ancient Egypt. Okay. And as I said before, keep in mind, okay, let's focus on that word, the West Africa. Because every time you mention that word, I'm going to hold it against you of who these people are. West Africa. It's all about the West. The West is the best. Okay. West Africa. Now, remember, they say you have nothing to do with Egypt. You come from West Africa. So let's keep that in mind. The West. The West. Let's focus on that word, the West. So we're going to begin in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 29. Okay, and here it speaks of the fall of Pharaoh. Okay, he goes on to say in Ezekiel 29, it says, in the 10th year, in the 10th month, in the 12th day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, prophecy against him and against all Egypt. Now keep in mind, okay, just like I said, I'm not a Bible follower. I don't follow the God of the Bible, okay? But but I do try to connect the Bible with history. Now I'm more of a historian than a Bible follower. So I try to connect it with historical events. Now, this right here, Ezekiel 29, is actually not a prophecy. It is actually a historical event that already came to pass. Now, we have to keep in mind that this was written after the fall of Egypt. Now, scholars they still having a debate about when the Bible was actually written. Some say that it was written in the 7th century BCE. Some even say that it was written in the 6th century BCE during the time of Cyrus, the king of Persia. Now, during this time, Egypt had already failed. And it had already been destroyed by the Assyrians. Okay. Now, the Bible says that it was caused by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. But when you go into the records, we see no mention of the king of Babylon or Nebuchadnezzar conquering Egypt. It never happened. When you go into what we call the Babylonian Chronicles, look it up. They have the translation on the internet. And it never mentions that Nebuchadnezzar conquered Egypt. As a matter of fact, it mentions that Nebuchadnezzar tried to invade Egypt and he was defeated by the Egyptians. Okay? But it never mentions a conquest of Egypt. This conquest of Egypt had already taken place, and it was caused by the Assyrians during the reign of Esarhaddon and the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. Okay? That's who caused the defeat of Egypt. That's who conquered Egypt. So Ezekiel 29 is actually referring to that event. It already came to pass. See, but the Bible writers try to write it in the Bible and try to make it seem like prophecy, but it was actually a historical event that already came to pass. This is not prophecy. This is historical. See? So, but yeah, it says, Son of man, set thy face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophecy against him and against all Egypt. Okay, but this is not prophecy, as I said. This is historical reality. And he says in chapter 3, speak and say, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against thee, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great dragon that lieth in the midst of his rivers, which have said, my river is my own, and I have made it for myself. And he says, okay, in chapter 4, he said, I will put hooks in thy jaws, and I will cause the fish of thy rivers to stick unto thy scales. And I will bring thee out of the midst of thy rivers, and all the fish of thy rivers shall stick unto thy scales. And I will leave thee thrown into the wilderness, thee and all the fish of thy rivers. Thou shalt not fall upon the fields. Thou shalt not be brought together, nor gathered. I have given thee for meat to beasts of the field and to the fowls of the heaven. Okay, so here, now this is speaking in metaphor. Okay, it's symbolic. You can't take it literally, but you have to translate it and decode it symbolically. Now, so what is it saying when he says, I will put hooks in thy jaws and will cause thy fish of thy rivers to stick unto thy scales, and I will bring thee up out of the midst of thy rivers, and all the fish of thy rivers shall stick unto thy scales. And I will leave thee thrown into the wilderness, thee and all the fish of thy rivers, thou shalt fall up on the open fields. Now, when it says, I will, when he says, I will cause the fish of thy rivers to stick unto thy scales and bring thee out of the midst of the rivers, and all the fish of the rivers shall stick unto thy scales. This is referring to Pharaoh and his people, okay, or Pharaoh and his multitude. That's just another way of saying that, but it's saying it in another way. It's not talking about fish, actual fish in the rivers. It is talking about Pharaoh. So it's like another way of saying, I will put hooks in thy jaws, and I will cause thy people, I will cause thy people to be brought together, okay, and I will leave thee thrown out into the wilderness. So it's talking about Pharaoh and his people. That's what it's talking about. It's not talking about actual fish, okay? So, but he says, and I will leave thee thrown into the wilderness, thee and all the fish of thy rivers. Now, it's talking about thee and all the people of Pharaoh. It's not talking about actual fish, okay? So it's saying that Pharaoh and his people will be exiled from the Nile River. They will no longer be dwelling along the Nile River. That's what it's saying, okay? Remember, it says in the beginning, okay? I will bring thee out of the midst of thy rivers, and all the fish that stick unto thy scales, and I will leave thee thrown into the wilderness, okay? So it's saying that Pharaoh and his people will be exiled from the Nile River into the wilderness, which is desert, okay? The desert. Keep that in mind, the desert, okay? Now, and it says, thou shalt fall upon the fields, and thou shalt not be brought together, nor gathered, for I have given thee for meat to beasts of the field and to the fowls of the heaven. Okay, so it's saying that they will not be brought together. They will not be gathered, okay? Meaning they will be scattered, okay, through this wilderness land, through this desert land, which we're going to find out which land this was later on. But let's continue, okay? It says, the land of Egypt shall be desolate and waste, and they shall know that I am the Lord, because he have said the river is mine. Okay. And he says, behold, therefore I am against thee, and I am against thy rivers, and I will make the land of Egypt utterly waste and desolate, from the tower of Syene even unto the border of Ethiopia. Okay. So it's saying that this land of Egypt, okay, remember, we're speaking in metaphors. This is not talking about the actual Egypt, which I'm going to get off into more. But notice it says here, from the I will make Egypt an utterly waste and desolate, from the tower of Syene, which is southern Egypt, to the border of Ethiopia, which is south of Egypt. I'm going to show what it means when it says the border of Ethiopia. Okay. Now, it's talking about a desert land, okay? But I'm going to get off. I'm going to read this more. And it says, no foot of man shall pass through it, nor foot of beast shall pass through it. Neither shall it be inhabited for 40 years, okay? But that's not historical, okay? Because when this happened, there is no record that says that Egypt, okay? Now keep in mind, I'm going to break it down here, okay? When we get off into the historical record, okay, there's no evidence that Egypt, the actual Egypt where the Nile River is, was ever desolate, okay, or uninhabited. It's not historical. So when it speaks of a desolate land or wasteland, it's not actually talking about Egypt along the Nile River. It's talking about a land outside of Egypt, which I will show. It's talking about a desolate land, because historically, Egypt, the Nile River, was never desolate. Now, so that's not historical. And if you take the Bible literally and think that this is talking about Egypt of the Nile River, okay, then you're not going to make any sense, because that Egypt was never historical. We read nowhere in any historical writings of Egypt of the Nile River was ever desolate or waste. Okay, but let's continue. Okay, and he says, okay, and we're going to go to chapter 12, Ezekiel 29 and 12. Okay, now, and he says, and I will make the land of Egypt desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate, in her cities, among the cities that are laid waste shall be desolate 40 years. And I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and will disperse them through the countries. Now we see here that it's saying, okay, now we just read earlier that Pharaoh and his people will be exiled, okay, as a whole. When it says the fish will stick unto thy scales, it's talking about, you know, Pharaoh and his people as a whole, or as united, will be exiled from the Nile River, but they will be thrown into the wilderness, into the wasteland, or into the desert, and there they will be scattered. Okay, it says here that I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations, and will disperse them through the countries. So it's saying when they were exiled out of the Nile River, they were scattered through a desolate desert country. That's what it's saying when you put it all together. Okay, remember, we have to put this all together. So that's what it's saying. And as I said before, this is not prophecy. This is historical. That's why they wrote it, because they already knew what happened. The Bible writers, they already knew what happened, and that's why they wrote it in here, you know, to try to make it seem as a prophecy, but it was actually something that already happened. You know, so that, you know, when you read this and say, oh, well, this is prophecy, but when we go to the historical records, it validates this prophecy. It shows that this already happened. This prophecy came to pass. No, no. It is showing that it is showing historical events that already came to pass, and it was put in the Bible as prophecy. And that's why, you know, the Bible was written late. The Bible was written after these events. You have to keep that in mind. Okay. Now, if we had primary sources of each of these prophets in these verses, showing and dated to the time that before the fall of Egypt, okay, then we can say that it was prophecy, but we don't. Okay, all biblical scholars and archaeologists agree that the Bible was written after the 7th and 6th century BCE. So these events already took place. Okay, and they're documented as well. They're documented. Okay, but I'm going to check the chat. Okay, see how many people got joining us. Okay, say we got, okay, Jose Gomez. Okay, welcome to the chat, Jose Gomez. We got Ghana Love saying, you may be a Israelite, join a GMS camp. What is your city home slice? Join a GM. No, I'm not an Israelite. Okay, and I will be lying if I said that I was an Israelite. Okay, so, you know, I am well learned and study in his history and historical reality, and that's how I know that I'm not an Israelite. But, you know, you are more than welcome to join in and get educated. You know, I'm not going to, bash you for your beliefs, but I'm just telling you the truth. Okay, I'm just telling you the truth. So don't get mad for just, for at me for just telling you the truth. But let's continue on with our lesson, okay? Okay. Because like I said, this is a ignored subject. No one is teaching it. And for those who do entertain it, they do not tell the truth about it. Because if they tell the truth about it, then they will see that it all points to you, African Americans, West Africans, okay? But let's continue. Now, we just went over Ezekiel 29, okay? So let us summarize that. It said that, okay, Pharaoh will be gathered. Pharaoh and his people will be gathered and will be exiled out of the Nile River and will be thrown into the wilderness. And there they will be scattered among the nations and dispersed through the countries. Okay? That's what Ezekiel 29 is saying when you read it symbolically. Okay? But let us go to Ezekiel 30. Okay? And he says, the word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, Son of man, prophecy, and say, thus said the Lord, how ye woe worth the day. Remember, this is not prophecy. This is historical. It already came to pass. So it's saying that it's prophecy, but this is historical. And we're going to skip down. It says, okay, in the Ezekiel 30:4, and the sword shall come up on Egypt, and great pain shall be in Ethiopia, when the slain shall fall in Egypt, and they shall take away her multitude, and her foundations shall be broken down. Okay, so this is saying that the sword shall come up on Egypt, or the defeat. Egypt shall be defeated, and great pain shall be in Ethiopia. Okay, it's talking about Cush, south of Egypt. And it says, the slain shall fall in Egypt, and they shall take away her multitude, and her foundations shall be broken down. So it's saying that the great population in Egypt shall dwindle, okay, or the great population of Egypt shall decrease. Egypt will no more be a populous nation, okay, as it was in old times, okay. And it's also saying that the power of Egypt and the foundations shall be broken down, meaning the founders, the pharaohs, the founders who made Egypt great, the power of Egypt, the Pharaoh. That's what it's talking about. Okay. Okay. So it's pretty much saying that all of the great population of Egypt shall decrease. And as I showed before, it shall be scattered throughout the nations and dispersed throughout the countries. And this includes Pharaoh and his people. Now, when it says Pharaoh, okay, it's not just talking about the individual alone, okay? It's talking about Pharaoh, the individual, and his people, his followers, meaning the royal house, the governors, okay, the nobleman, the army, okay, the people that ruled Egypt, the people that made Egypt great, that made Egypt populous, and made Egypt a large population. It is saying here that the population of Egypt will decrease, which already happened. Okay, which already happened. Now, before I continue, I'm going to briefly break down what that means. Now, we know every time Egypt was taken over by a foreign conqueror, what happened? The Egyptians always rose together in rebellion, and they always united and took back Egypt from that foreign ruler, which is whether if it be the Assyrians or the Persians. We know that the Egyptians always rebelled and took back Egypt. Okay, but later on, we don't see that happening. Later on, the foreigners kept Egypt and ruled Egypt forever. And still to this day, Egypt has never been taken back by Egyptians. Okay. Egypt today is ruled by Arabs, and it is mostly inhabited by Arabs. Okay. The Arabs took Egypt from the Romans. The Romans took Egypt from the Greeks. Okay. And the Greeks took Egypt from the Persians. Okay. But after the Persians, the Egyptians never took back Egypt. So when it says the population of Egypt decreased, that means that there were no Egyptians in Egypt to take back Egypt. That's what it's talking about. Okay. And this is documented throughout all the histories, which I will probably get off into more in future videos. I will show those accounts, how the Egyptians, they always rose up and united and took back Egypt when Egypt was in trouble. But later on, we don't see that. Okay, just keep that in mind. But let's move on. Okay, we got the records right here. Okay, when you have the sources at hand, there's no disputing it. Okay, so we have nothing to worry about because the sources are right here, right in my face. Okay, and he says, yes, and the sword shall come upon Egypt, Ezekiel 30:4, and great pain shall be in Ethiopia. And when the slain shall fall in Egypt, and they shall take away her multitude, and her foundations shall be broken down. Okay, so we're saying that the multitude or the population or the great population of Egypt shall decrease. Okay, and it says here in verse 5, Ethiopia and Libya and Lydia and all the mingled people and Chub and the man of the land that is in the league shall fall with them by the sword. So it's saying here that the allies of Egypt shall also, fall with Egypt and shall be exiled out of Egypt as well. Okay. Okay. Because we know that other nations that neighbored Egypt also helped Egypt in her wars against, against Assyria and Persia and Babylon. And it's talking about the neighboring Libyans to the west and the Ethiopians to the south. That's what it's saying. But let's move on. Okay. He said, thus saith the Lord, they also that uphold Egypt shall fall, and the pride of a power shall come down. From the tower of Syene shall they fall in it by the sword, saith the Lord. Okay. It's saying those that uphold Egypt and the pride of a power shall come down. From the tower of Syene shall they fall by the sword. Okay. So it's saying that those who support Egypt or uphold Egypt shall fall with Egypt, meaning, again, the allies of Egypt. Okay. The allies of Egypt that were in Egypt, and many of these allies, such as the Libyans and the Cushites, they served as garrisons in Egypt. Okay, they inhabited the fortresses of Egypt, and they were in the army of Egypt as well, and they helped the Egyptians in their wars. So that's who it's talking about when it says this. Okay. Okay. And also, a lot of the territory, okay, I would say the majority of the territory west of Egypt and south of Egypt was also Egyptian territory. Okay. So, that's pretty much, it's all connected to Egypt. Okay. This includes the western part. Remember the west. Okay. The south. Okay. That's what it's talking about. But let's continue, okay? And he says, verse 7, okay? Ezekiel 30:7. And they shall be desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate, and her cities shall be in the midst of the cities that are wasted. So it's saying here that the cities in Egypt will be destroyed, will be in ruins, will be wasted, okay? And and it's saying that it will be desolate. Okay, but still, it's referring to a desolate land. Okay, that will become the new Egypt, which I'm going to show later. Okay, but let's continue. It says here in verse 8, and they shall know that I am the Lord when I have set fire in Egypt, and when all her helpers shall be destroyed. And it says in verse 9, in that day shall messengers go forth from me in ships to make the careless Ethiopians afraid, and great pain shall come up on them as in the day of Egypt. Lo, it cometh. Now, notice it says here that messengers shall go from me in ships to make the careless Ethiopians afraid, and great pain shall come up on them. Now, we know that, as I have stated in previous videos, that the ancestors of African Americans in West Africa were known as Ethiopians. Okay, and it's saying it's saying here that messengers shall come forth in ships. Okay, and a great pain shall come up on the Ethiopians. Now, that right there connects more to the Atlantic slave trade. Okay, because it is referring to Ethiopians. And the Ethiopians, the people on the west coast of Africa, were known as Ethiopians. Okay, so and it mentions ships. So that's just another way saying that messengers or men in ships will come to the Ethiopians and cause a great pain upon the Ethiopians. So, and we know that the people on the Atlantic, even during the 14th century AD, that the people of West Africa were still called Ethiopians. Even when you look at a 1700s map and you look at the sea or the Atlantic Ocean, it is called the Ethiopian Sea. Okay, it is known as the Ethiopian Sea. Even as late as the 1700s, West Africa was still called Ethiopia, and the people were still known as Ethiopians or Negroes, okay, or even Sudan, but still Ethiopians, okay? Now, we're not in Israel, okay, when we deal with Ethiopians. We are in West Africa, okay? So, but let's continue, okay? And it says, thus saith the Lord, I will also make the multitude of Egypt to cease by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Now, as I stated before, okay, this event was not caused by during the time of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. It was caused by the king of Assyria, who lived, I believe, I want to say 100 years or before Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And also it says the king of Babylon. Now we have to keep in mind that Babylon is a Assyrian city. When we go to Herodotus, he says that Babylon is a city of Assyria. And we know that Babylon was founded by Nimrod. Nimrod was the founder of Assyria, and he founded Babylon. So Babylon is a Assyrian city. So either way, you know, it is referring to Assyrians when it says the king of Babylon, because the Assyrians were the kings of Babylon as well. See, in Assyria, you had the city of Babylon, and you also had the city of Nineveh, okay, which was the capital. Nineveh was a Assyrian city, and Babylon was also a Assyrian city, okay? And that's what it's saying, okay? But let's take a look at the chat, and then we're going to move on, see who's joining us, okay? Okay, we have 8 people in the house. Great, great. Okay, we have Great Somalia TV saying keep the truth coming. Welcome to the live stream, Great Somalia TV. Thank you for joining in. And yes, indeed, I will definitely keep the truth coming because it is not being told. Okay, God, Emperor, Almighty, Forefather, Trump, Life Matters. That's just another troll. a white supremacist troll, okay? But, you know, but speak your mind, you know, and if I disagree with you, then I will correct you. It says Great Somalia TV says we need to claim ancient Egypt history back from these Eurasians who are obsessed with African history. Yes, I agree. Definitely. We definitely need to take back ancient Egypt because it belongs to us. It rightfully belongs to us. Okay. And it does not belong to them. And they're trying to steal it by using racism, lies, and cover-ups. Okay. Which we are exposing. Okay. And they have been lying for I don't know how long, and they are still lying to this very day. Okay. And this is why they are hiding, they are running, and they don't want to face up to this truth. Okay. But we will make this truth known, which is why I'm doing this video. Okay. So again, yeah, welcome to all that is joining in. And you can always go back over the video after the stream and look at it. But we're dealing with the descendants of Pharaoh in West Africa. Okay. Okay. And we have T Spells in the house. Welcome, T Spells. Thank you for tuning in. Soup fam. Okay. Yeah. Soup fam to you as well. And thank you for tuning in. And I'm going to continue with the lesson. Okay. So now, okay, Ezekiel chapter 30, verse 11. Okay, he says, he's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. He and his people with him, the terrible of the nations, shall be brought to destroy the land, and they shall draw their swords against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. Okay, and now it says the verse before, you know, thus said the Lord, I will make the multitude of Egypt to cease by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He, and then the next verse, it says, he and his people with him, the terrible of nations, shall be brought to destroy the land, and they shall draw their swords against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. Now, as I stated before, okay, this was not caused by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. It was caused by the Assyrians. Okay. Now you can go look it up. You can go look at the annals of Ashurbanipal. You can look it up on the internet, or you can type in the destruction of Thebes by the Assyrians, and it tells of the destruction of Thebes by the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal that happened in 650 BCE. Okay, and this was the first time Egypt was literally utterly destroyed. Okay, it was a devastating event that happened in Egypt. Okay, and this is what caused the Egyptians to, you know, be exiled and scattered through other parts of Africa, which I will get off into later. Okay, now let's get off into the next verse. Okay, Ezekiel 30, chapter 12. Okay, now this is very interesting, and it says, and I will make the rivers dry and sell the land into the hand of the wicked. And I will make the land waste and all that is therein by the hand of strangers. The Lord hath spoken it. Now, what does this mean? Okay, it says, I will make the rivers dry and sell the land into the hand of the wicked. And I will make the land waste and all that is therein by the hand of strangers. I, the Lord, have spoken it. Now, when it says, I will make the rivers dry. Now, we know that there was no time in Egypt, okay, according to history, that the river or the Nile River became dry. Okay. Now, what is it saying here? It is saying that the new Egypt, okay, the Egypt, it's talking about another Egypt where it will be dry land. Okay. No rivers. Okay. Dried up rivers. If there was rivers that used to exist, the rivers are all dried up. So it's talking about a dry land that you know that once had rivers, but the river is dry. So it's talking about a dry and desolate land or wasted land. That's what it's saying. Okay. And it says, by the hand of strangers, I, the Lord, have spoken. Now, when it says by the hand of strangers, this means that Egypt, okay, the Egypt on the Nile, the first Egypt, okay, the powerful Egypt, will be inhabited and ruled by strangers. That's what it's saying. So those Egyptians that once populated Egypt and made Egypt a great large population, and the power of Egypt, of Pharaoh, okay, will be inhabiting a dry land, which I will show later. Okay. And the Egypt they used to rule, the Egypt they once ruled and once inhabited, will be taken over and ruled by strangers or foreigners, which were the Assyrians and Babylonians and Persians and the other foreigners who came after them. That's what it's talking about. Okay. Man. Wow. So now you see how, okay, now you see how this truth comes out when you actually deal with the sources. Okay. When it actually starts to get real, we see how the truth comes out when these sources are not ignored and not hidden and swept up under the rug. You see how the truth comes out. Let us continue, please. Okay. Now it says, and thus saith the Lord. Okay. Yeah. So let's read that again, because that's very interesting. It says, I will make the river dry and sell the land into the hand of the wicked, and I will make the land waste, all that is therein, by the hands of strangers. I, the Lord, have spoken it. Now, if we read that symbolically, you have to read it symbolically. You can't take it literally, because if you take it literally, it's not going to make any historical sense. So it is saying, you know, I will, or the Egyptians, okay, Pharaoh, okay, will be driven, as I said before in Ezekiel 29. Remember, we have to put it all together. Will be driven into a desert land, a dry land, where the rivers are dry, as it's saying here. Okay. Okay. And the land will be waste. So it's pretty much saying that the new land of the Egyptians will be a dry desert land. They will no longer inhabit the rich Nile Valley, which will be taken over and ruled by foreigners or strangers. That's what it's saying. Okay. But let's continue. Okay. Okay. And I don't have to keep repeating these things, but you pretty much know what I'm talking about. So you can go back over it, do your own study. But let's go here in chapter 13. Okay. It says, thus saith the Lord, I will destroy the idols and will cause the images to cease out of No. And there shall be no more a prince of the land of Egypt. And I will put fear in the land of Egypt. And I will make Pathros desolate. I will set fire in Zohan, and I will execute judgment in No. Now, let's go back over that, okay? It says, thus said the Lord, I will destroy the idols, and I will cause their images to cease out of No. Now, Noph is the city of Memphis. That's what it's talking about here, Noph. N-O-P-H, Noph. So it's saying that he will make the images, okay, and the idols or the statues disappear out of Memphis. So it's mean like the statues and the tombs will be destroyed, and they will no longer exist in Egypt. And that is a fact, because a lot of images in Egypt have been destroyed. Okay. And that's why, they got the museums showing the remnants of the artifacts, but there were many more artifacts and images of the ancient Egyptians before it was attacked and destroyed by all these foreigners. Okay. So if Egypt had not been destroyed or attacked by those foreigners, okay, we will see a whole lot more of images in Egypt. As a matter of fact, we will still be in Egypt. Yes, we will still be in Egypt, ruling Egypt. But being that it was attacked and destroyed by foreigners. You know, a lot of images got destroyed. A lot of statues got destroyed. A lot of tomb images got destroyed. And that's what it's talking about here, okay? That's what it's talking about, okay? So it's like, and we also have to keep in mind that the many artifacts that's being taken out of Egypt and put in museums in Europe and America, okay? So even the artifacts are being, what we say, scattered and dispersed throughout the nations. And the Egyptians, talking about us, yes, us, the West Africans, okay? The Black Americans, the descendants of slaves, were also scattered throughout the nations and dispersed throughout the countries. That's what it's talking about, okay? And we also see that the images, the statues of and the images all up in the museums in France, in Britain, America, you know, places outside of Africa, housing the Egyptian artifacts, statues. So these people, they pretty much know that who were the true descendants of the ancient Egyptians, you know, but they just trying to keep it hidden. I mean, it's not, how can I say, it's not out of coincidence, okay? They know who you are, but you just don't know who you are, and they don't want you to know who you are, pretty much. So that's why they're keeping it covered up. They're not entertaining it, but let's move on, okay? Now, so I went over that. It says, I will expose, yeah, I will destroy the idols, and I will cause the images to cease out of No. No is Memphis. And there shall be no more a prince of the land of Egypt. And I will put fear in the land of Egypt. Now, when it says here that there should be no more a prince of the land of Egypt, it is talking about there shall be no more a native Egyptian Pharaoh of the land of Egypt. That's what it's talking about, okay? It is saying that the native Egyptian Pharaoh shall no longer rule Egypt, but Egypt shall be ruled by foreigners, which is still ruled by foreigners and inhabited by foreigners till this very day, okay? And I will get off later into who was this last native Egyptian Pharaoh or Prince of Egypt, who was the last native Egyptian Pharaoh to rule Egypt. And that's what it's talking about here, okay? So, yeah. So whether if you want to see it as prophecy or historical reality, it is a historical reality. It happened, okay? So let's move on. And he says, okay, and I will put fear in the land of Egypt, and I will make Pathros desolate, and I will set fire in Zohan and execute judgment in No. Now, Pathros means southern land, okay? When it's southern land, it's talking about the desolate land, which I will get off into. It's talking about a desert, which was actually a southern interior land, okay? And it says, I will execute judgment in No. Now, when it says No, it's talking about Thebes, okay? The city of Ammon, No Ammon. Look it up, okay? And it says, but I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, and the arms of Pharaoh shall fall down, and they shall know I am the Lord when I shall put my sword into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall stretch it out upon the land of Egypt. Now, this here is interesting. Okay, we're going to go over it again. It says, I will strengthen my arms of the king of Babylon. Now, notice it says the king of Babylon. It doesn't mention Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, like I said, we got to read this in metaphor and symbolism. Now, the king of Babylon, okay, it doesn't mention Nebuchadnezzar. It is talking about the Assyrian king, okay, because the Assyrians, as I said before, were also the kings of Babylon, because Babylon was a Assyrian city. Yes, Babylon was founded by Assyrians and by the Assyrian king Nimrod or Ninus. Okay. And it says, and the arms of Pharaoh shall fall down. So it's saying that the power of Egypt shall fall. The power of Pharaoh shall fall. So, and it says, and they shall know I am the Lord when I shall put my sword in the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall stretch it out upon the land of Egypt, meaning he will stretch his power and destroy the land of Egypt. He will stretch out his authority, his power, and bring wrath, destruction up on the land of Egypt. That's what it's talking about. And it says here again in Ezekiel 30, chapter 26, it says, and I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them among the countries, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Again, it's saying here, I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations and disperse them among the countries, and they shall know I am the Lord. So it's pretty much saying here the same thing. The Egyptians will be scattered among the nations, okay, and among the countries, and they shall know that I am the Lord. Now, as we just read before, the land that they will be scattered on will be a desolate and wasteland, okay, which we're going to move on to now, okay. And but before we get off into what this land was, I'm going to read one more scripture from the Bible, and that's going, and I'm going to put a stop to that there, okay. We're going to end it in the Bible from there, okay. We're going to end it from there. And it says, but let's go to Ezekiel 32, chapter 18. Okay, chapter 32, verse 18. And it says, Son of man, wail for the multitude of Egypt, and cast them down, even her and the daughters of the famous nations, unto the nether parts of the earth, with them that go down into the pits. Now, notice it says, Son of man, wail for the multitude of Egypt. Okay, the multitude, meaning the people of Pharaoh, the multitude, Pharaoh and his multitude, which you can also read about later on in the scripture. It said, cast them down, even her and the daughters of the famous nations, unto the nether parts of the earth, with them that go down into the pit. Okay, now we have to keep it symbolic. Okay, now we know that literally there is no nether parts of the earth or pit or what we call a underworld. Okay, the ancient Egyptians, they spoke of this underworld where the spirits of the dead went to, but what is this talking about? Literally, historically, okay, it's talking about a place that's far away from Egypt, the nether parts of the earth. That means a far away land, okay, with them that go down into the pit. Now, when it says with them that goes down into the pit, it's talking about a dead land or the land of the dead, which I will also expand on. Which land is this talking about? Okay, now, so yeah, but you can read that for yourself. But yeah, this here is saying that the multitude of Egypt and Pharaoh, okay, the people of Egypt, the people of Pharaoh, the multitude of Egypt will be cast to the netherworld, to a far off land, okay, into the pit, meaning to a dead land or the land of the dead. Okay, well, let's continue. That's what that means. Okay, now when it speaks of, okay, now when it speaks of this dead land or this desolate land, this desert land, this wasted land with dry rivers and wild beasts, okay, which we went over. Wild beasts, it mentions wild beasts, dry rivers, in a desolate, wasted land. Definitely, okay, definitely not talking about the rich Nile Valley of Egypt, but it's talking about a desert land. Now, some of you may try to cherry pick, and say that this land was any land, any desert land, or and try to place it wherever you wish to place it, but it's not going to make it valid, okay? Because it's just theory, okay? And I don't like theories. So, what land was this? And how can we tell the truth about this without the corruption of our own theories, okay, and imaginations? What land was it talking about? The desert land, okay? So that means we will have to go to a source that is contemporary with this time in order to get the truth, okay? Because if you go to a later source, then it's not going to count. It's going to be invalid and it's going to be false, and you're going to be guilty of committing falsehood or fraudulent, which I do not like, okay? So the question is, what land was this desolate land? This dry, desolate land of dry rivers, okay, wild beasts, okay? What source can we go to that's contemporary with this time that speaks of this land? Okay, because we have to go to a source that's contemporary with the time that took place during the fall of Egypt, okay? We know that the fall of Egypt occurred in the 6th century BCE. The 7th and 6th century BCE is when the fall of Egypt took place. So we have to go to a source that's closer or contemporary to that time in order to get the truth about what land was this, okay? And that source is none other than the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. Yes, there you have it. Yes, I know you hate Herodotus. The pseudos hate Herodotus. Yes, the liars, the pseudo scholars hate Herodotus because Herodotus put forth a lot of this truth that they want to keep hidden from us, and that's why they always try to discourage us from going to Herodotus. But okay, we're going to look at the chat and see who's joining in. Okay. All right. Okay. So we have Great Somalia TV. Okay. The Spells. Okay. And we have Brother Anthony Harris in the house. Okay. Yeah, peace, Brother Anthony Harris. Thanks for joining in. Yeah, and it says you figure out how to work the stream yard yet. Yes. Well, actually, I'm just doing a webcam stream, but I haven't got the stream yard yet. But I plan on getting that later on. But yeah, well, I figured this one out. So, but yeah, this is great. But yeah, anyways, and the name of the show is Descendants of Pharaoh in West Africa, the Fall of Egypt. And we're going over the Bible, and other historical sources to get to the bottom of this. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, Brother Anthony Harris. And let's continue, okay? Now, as I said before, okay, the source that we have to go to in order to answer this question truthfully is a source that's contemporary with the time that the fall of Egypt took place. And as I said before, that source is none other than Herodotus, the Greek historian who lived during the 5th century BCE, okay? Herodotus, who went to Egypt during 450 BCE. So he lived during the 5th century BCE. And he is the closest source to that time period. So no matter what he says you may not like, okay, or no matter how good or not good what he says, okay, the truth is in this source, okay? You may not like what he says, but he is the closest to the truth. So we have to go to him. We can't go to anything else, because a lot of you want to go to sources that, you know, because it sounds good. No, it's a late source, but you want to entertain it because it sounds good. Yeah, it may sound good, but it is invalid and it is a lie, and it doesn't count because it's not contemporary with the time. And although you may believe that you're coming to some truth, you're actually committing fraud by going to a very late source that's not contemporary with the time. We have to stick with the sources that are contemporary with the time, no matter how it sounds, because it is the closest to the truth, okay? So let's get off into it, okay? So what land was this talking about? This dry, desolate land spoken of in the book of Ezekiel 29 and 30 that will be the new home of Pharaoh and his people, okay? Let's go to Herodotus. Herodotus, the Histories, book 4, chapter 185. He goes on to say, in quotes, beyond this ridge, the southern and inland parts of Libya are desolate and waterless. There are no wild beasts, no rain, no forests. This region is woolly without moisture. Okay. Now notice he says, beyond this ridge, the southern and inland parts of Libya, okay, are desolate. Okay, remember, the Bible speaks of a desolate land. Okay, so it's talking about Libya, or the southern and inland parts of Libya, not even northern Libya, but the southern, the deep southern parts of Libya. Okay, and as I stated before on my previous video, Libya, ancient Libya, okay, not modern Libya, but ancient Libya, okay, stretched from the Nile, okay, ancient Libya stretched from the Nile River all the way west to the Atlantic Ocean, okay? Now, but before I move on, okay, when it says Libya, let's what direction of Libya was from the Nile, from Egypt and the Nile River, okay? Let's answer that question, okay? What direction of Libya, what direction was Libya from Egypt and the Nile River? Okay, let's go to it. Now, so what direction? Was Libya east of the Nile River? Was Libya south of the Nile River? Or was Libya west of the Nile River? Remember, as I said earlier, we're going to hold them against that word, because they always say, you as a West African have no ties to Egypt. Remember that word, west, okay? We talk about west. Remember that. West, the West. They say West Africans have no ties to Egypt. So we're saying here that Libya, what direction was Libya from Egypt? And he says, okay, in Herodotus, we're going to go to Herodotus, book 4, 167. And he says, but in fact, the Persian army was being sent out, as I believe, for the purpose of subduing Libya. For the Libyans, there are many nations of various kinds, but few of them are subject to the king, while the greater number of them pay no regard to Darius. Okay. And he says in the next chapter, okay, book 4, 168, he says, now the Libyans have their dwelling as follows, beginning from Egypt. Okay. Okay. Beginning from Egypt. He says the first of the Libyans are the Adur Makade. Okay. Then let's go further down. He says, next after this, in chapter 169, next after the Adur Makade, okay, he says, next after this come the Gilgamesh, occupying the country towards the west. Okay. Occupying the country towards the west. Okay. As far as the island of Aphrodisias. Okay. Now, let's move on. He says, next to the Gilgamesh on the west are the Abiste, or the Asbastai. Yeah, that's okay. Next to the Gilgamesh, okay, meaning a Libyan tribe or Libya. Next to the Gilgamesh on the west are the Asbastai, okay, on the west. Okay, it says next after the Asbastai on the west come the Akusai, okay, the Akusai. Next after the Asbastai on the west come the Akusai. Okay, now these words are hard to mention, but it's saying, okay, next after the Alsky, the Alski, okay, how can I say it? The Alski side. Yeah, next after the Alski side, towards the west come the Nasamunians. Okay, so it's pretty much showing here that Libya means west, west of the Nile, west of Egypt. Okay, remember that word, west. Okay, we're in the west now. Okay, so what? Now all of a sudden, what? The west is the south. The west is the east. The west is not the west, because that's what you've been saying. We as West Africans, we have nothing to do with Egypt. But when you read the records, when you read the source, all we hear is the West. Okay? Yes, the West. All eyes are on the West. The West is the best. So we see here it is talking about the West. Okay? Remember, the West. You said it. West Africans. We're in West Africa now. We're not in Egypt no more. We're in the west of Egypt. We're in the west of the Nile Valley. The West. Okay? But let's continue. Okay? Okay? When it says west, it's talking about west of Egypt, then farther west of Egypt, and extreme west of Egypt. That's what it's talking about when it mentions Libya, the west. The west of the Nile River. From the west of the Nile River all the way west to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay? That is the real Libya or ancient Libya. Okay? And but we find out here, okay? So now that we got that situated, okay, that Libya was all the land west of the Nile River. Not just west of Egypt, but also west of Kush, west of Uganda, west of Sudan was Libya. Okay? And he says, because he says here, he's showing you that beyond the ridge, the southern and inland parts, okay? This also means west of the southern Nile, okay? Not just west of the northern Nile in Egypt, but west of all the Nile to the south, okay? Because it's one whole land, okay? And you have to include it all. You can't cherry pick and say, well, it's talking about this part. No. Libya, or the Africa that sits in between the Nile Valley and the Atlantic Ocean, is one vast land, one vast 3,000 miles of land. That's what it is talking about. It's not talking about one small area. It's talking about this whole entire region. Okay? And he says, and he makes it very clear, he's talking about the southern parts of Libya, meaning west of southern Egypt and west of Kush. Okay? That's what it's talking about here. Okay. He makes that very clear. And he says the southern inland parts of Libya are desolate and waterless. There are no wild beasts, no rain, no forest. This region is woolly without moisture. That's what it's talking about. So when it says the desolate land in Ezekiel chapter 30, okay, this is the land it was talking about. Okay. And as a matter of fact, I will go so far to say that the Bible writers got this from Herodotus and put it in their Bible. That's a possibility because they already knew. They knew where these people were. They knew where these descendants of the Egyptians and the descendants of the Pharaohs were. They knew. And when we deal with the desert parts of Egypt, it is talking about this western desert, west of Egypt. Yes. Okay, we're talking about Egypt. Okay, and we talk about Egypt in the west. So, what more do you want? Okay, we're talking about the west. We're talking about Egypt in the west. But you want to continue to lie and deny us of our true history and glory and try to credit to somebody else that did not inhabit this land to the west of the Nile River. Yes. I heard some of you say, well, yeah, the ancient Egyptians are in southern Sudan. The descendants of the Pharaoh are in southern Sudan. They're in East Africa. No, they have nothing to do with West Africa. Well, the Horn of Africa is not west of the Nile River. Okay? Sudan, southern Sudan is not in the west. Okay? The Horn of Africa is east of the Nile River. Southern Sudan is south of the Nile River. Okay? Libya is west of the Nile River. So remember, as I said in the beginning, keep that word west. We're talking about the west. Okay? But now that the truth is coming out, oh, I guess the west is not in the west anymore, huh? No, that's not talking about the west. That's talking about southern Sudan. No. Stop it. Okay? We're in the west now. Okay? Y'all have been downplaying and have been disrespecting West Africa, the west of Africa for so long. Now the truth is coming out. Now the truth is coming back to bite you in the behind. Okay? Now we're talking about the West. Okay? So you know you've been lying. Some of you already knew this truth and you just lied. Okay? And that's why you try so hard and you are so desperate to discredit and downplay the greatness of West Africa. Shame on you. Some of you Negroes ought to be ashamed of yourself. Some of you Negroes are the lowest of low. Pitiful. Okay? You knew this truth and you never told it to our people. Okay? How many decades, how many years, how many decades, how many centuries have to go by with this truth not being known and not being taught to our people? How much time got to go by with this truth being kept hidden? Well, today is a new day. And this truth is coming out right now. Okay? Now, but let's continue. So we just read from Herodotus. Beyond this ridge, the southern and inland parts of Libya are desolate and waterless. So when Ezekiel is speaking of that desolate land, okay, he is talking about the southern interior parts of Libya, or the southern interior parts of West Africa. Okay, I'm not just going to say Africa. I'm talking about West Africa. So when we deal with Libya, we're in the west of Africa. Okay, we're in the west of Africa now. All one whole vast land. Okay, You have been downplaying us. You have been disrespecting us for so long. Now it is time for the truth to come out. I'm not playing with you liars anymore, okay? I'm going in today. I'm bringing forth this truth. I'm making this truth known to our people, okay? But yeah, let's continue, okay? All right. We're gonna cut it short in a little bit, but let's continue, okay? So we got that cleared away. According to Herodotus, this desolate land, this desert spoken of by Ezekiel, was all the western desert west of Egypt. That's what it's talking about, okay? Okay, it's talking about the western parts of Africa. And this includes, okay, keep in mind, this includes the deserts of Mauritania, the desert south of Morocco, and the deserts of Mali and Niger. Yes, this includes those areas. That's what it's talking about. It's talking about Timbuktu, okay, the northern part of the Niger River where Timbuktu stand, Ouagadougou in Mauritania, in Ghana, that's also in the Sahara Desert. Yes. So, and but notice, okay, notice it says beyond the ridge, the southern and inland parts of Libya are desolate and waterless. Okay, and there are no wild beasts, no rain, no forest. This region is woolly without moisture. But it doesn't mention the people. Okay, but we're going to get to that and find out who the people were. Okay, and we're going to do that now. Okay, and we're going to move on to the next. Now he says, okay, we're going to move on to the next book of Herodotus, which is book 4, chapter 197. Okay, so we're going to Herodotus, book 4, chapter 197. He says, and quote, "These are all the Libyans whom we can name, and the majority of their kings cared nothing for the king of the Medes at the time of which I write, nor do they care for him now. I have this much further to say of this country: 4 nations and no more inhabitants, as far as we know, inhabited." Yeah. Let's read that again. Okay. Let's take our time. Okay. Let's read that again. No need to rush, but we're going to get it right this time. Okay. He says, Herodotus, book 4, 197. "These are all the Libyans whom we can name, and the majority of their kings cared nothing for the king of the Medes at the time of which I write, nor do they care for him now. I have this much further to say of this country: 4 nations and no more, as far as we know, inhabited, 2 of which are aboriginal and 2 not. The Libyans in the north and the Ethiopians in the south of Libya are aboriginal. The Phoenicians and Greeks are later settlers." Okay, so now we see here that according to Herodotus, the northern part of Libya on the Mediterranean, near the Mediterranean Sea, was inhabited by Libyans or Libyan tribes. Okay, but the southern part, okay, the same part in the desert, south of the desert, or all the land south of the Sahara Desert, was inhabited by Ethiopians. Okay, so we see here that the people of this southern region or south of Libya were known as Ethiopians. Okay, and just as it is, he is talking about all of the land south of Libya, he is talking about all of the people south of Libya, which are Ethiopians. And as I stated in my previous video, the Egyptians migrated amongst the indigenous people of Ethiopia and became the Ethiopians, as I stated in my previous video. That is a historical fact, okay? And the Egyptians and these indigenous Africans became the Ethiopians during during the new kingdom of Egypt, or during the 18th dynasty. But we see here, after the fall of Egypt, more Egyptians came, because this was Egyptian territory. Just as I showed in the book of Genesis, chapter 10, verse 13. Okay, Misrahim begot Ludim and Lehabim, which is Libya. Misrahim begot Libya, meaning Egyptians begot Libya. Okay, Egyptians in Libya, or Egyptians in the West. Okay, that is the truth you get when you are honest about what you read. Okay, that is the truth. So that is what Genesis chapter 10 and 13 is saying. Misrahim begot Libya. Egyptians begot Libya. Okay, even the sons of Ham. Okay, the sons of Ham begot Cush. Egypt, meaning indigenous Hamites, begot Cush, begot Egypt, begot Canaan. Okay, Hamites who were already there became the founders of Egypt. That's what it's saying. Okay, Misrahim, Egyptians begot the West. Egyptians settled the West. Egyptians migrated in the West. Okay, we're dealing with the West. Okay, and as I'm showing, these Egyptians were the later historical people that we know as Ethiopians. Okay, so when it says that Egyptians begot the West, or begot Libya, it is talking about the southern parts of Libya, not the northern parts of Libya. Okay, that's what it's talking about. Okay, Herodotus, book 2, chapter 242. The Amunians are a colony of Egyptians and Ethiopians. Okay, and the name for Zeus is Amun. Okay, that's what it's talking about. These colonies from Egypt settled all the west of Africa. Okay, from the Nile Valley, from the oases to the desert, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, and became the people we know as Ethiopians. And this is not the end of it. I will go further in future videos. Trust me on that. And believe me, the truth is shocking. We have been lied to, but the truth is coming out now. So as we just found out, okay, this southern desolate land spoken of in Ezekiel was none other than the deep southern interior parts of Libya, or West Africa. Okay, I'm going to call it West Africa. Yes, because it's dealing with the West. And we find out that the people of this southern land was Ethiopians. They were Ethiopians. Okay, so there you have it. Okay, this land was none other than the western desert from the Nile River to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, and the people were, as we just learned, Ethiopians. Okay, and we know that Ethiopians worshipped Amun. Okay, that's why West Africa, or the land west of Egypt, was called Amun. Even in the hieroglyphs, it was called Amun. Okay, I built for you a temple to the west of Thebes. Amun. Amun, the god of Libya. It's called Amun. And you can do your own research. You don't have to take my word for it. But yeah, before we continue, we're going to take another look at the chat. Okay. Okay. Now, here we have Soli Dio Gloria in the house. Okay, just something to think about, brother. God bless you and yours in these strange and difficult times we're living in. Yes, thanks for that, sister, or brother, whoever you are. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something to think about. Okay, but most importantly, okay, it's something to know. Okay, and it's something to teach, and it's definitely something to entertain. Okay, which these other scholars are not doing it. They're not entertaining it. You know why? Because they are corrupt. Okay, they have been trained, they have been brainwashed by these universities and these racist white Egyptologists to not teach this truth, but to teach some other nonsense that has nothing to do with this. Okay? And they claim that they got all this knowledge and they qualified, and they say you got to be qualified, but they never teach this. And most of them are dishonest. They're very dishonest, and they never teach this truth. But you're getting it here today. So let's continue. Let's see here. Okay. Also, for those of you who are watching, please press the thumbs up button. Okay, we got 10 people in the building, so we should have 10 thumbs up. If you can press the thumbs up button, I will appreciate it. Okay, I will definitely appreciate it if you can press the thumbs up button. Okay, Great Somalia TV says it's very possible that ancient Egyptians went to West Africa just like how they settled all the way to near Turkey and became the Colchians. Yes, I went over that in my previous video, in one of my videos, that yes, the same way they reached West Africa was the same way the Egyptians reached the Colchians, because it shows how the Egyptians established their colonies. It was through military. Okay, so most of the colonies that left Egypt were soldiers from the military, okay, that settled in lands outside of Egypt. And that's what it's talking about when Great Somalia TV says how the Egyptians settled near Turkey and the Colchians, okay, which is modern day Georgia. The land of the Colchians is in Georgia. Yes. Yes, but people, yes, before I continue, please press that thumbs up button. It's very simple. You just got to click on it one time. Okay, just click on it one time, show your brother some love, and press that thumbs up button. Okay, I will really appreciate that. But let's continue. Okay, all right. Now, okay, let's see here. Just give me a minute. Okay. So now we're going to move on, okay? And I'm going to close out here in a little bit and just save the rest for another video, but we're going to cover all this in this video. Okay, now to summarize, okay? And I'm going to do that at the end of the video as well. Now, we just found out that Herodotus, okay, according to Herodotus, this desolate land, this dry and desolate desert that the Egyptians and the people of Pharaoh made their new home, was all the desert west of Egypt to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay. And notice it says also in the Bible, it speaks of wild beasts. Okay. Now, it speaks of wild beasts as well. Okay. And we're going to read here, okay? I'm going to make it very brief. Now we're going to go to Herodotus, book 4, chapter 181, okay? And he says here, thus then have been mentioned those nomad Libyans who live along the sea coast. And above these, inland is the region of Libya, which has wild beasts, okay? And above the wild beast region, there stretches a raised belt of sand extending from Thebes of the Egyptians to the pillars of Hercules. Okay. So now we see here, according to Herodotus, okay, the southern parts of Libya was inhabited by wild beasts as well. And as we just read in the Bible, it speaks of wild beasts being in this desert region that will be the home of the Egyptians. And according to Herodotus, this wild beast region was the southern interior part of Libya. Okay. And he says here, okay, the desert of Libya extends from Thebes of the Egyptians to the pillars of Hercules. Now it's talking about from Egypt to the Atlantic Ocean, because the pillars of Hercules It's known today as the Straits of Gibraltar, and which is on the Atlantic, which is 2,700 miles west of Egypt, very far west. Okay, and it's talking about the land, the rest of the land beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Okay, which I will show. But as we see here, okay, it's talking about, it calls it the wild beast region. Okay, and I want to go over here for a little bit. It says, he says further down, okay, from these, okay, extending from these of the Egyptians to the Pillars of Hercules. And he says, in this belt, at intervals of about 10 days' journey, there are fragments of salt in great lumps forming hills. And at the tops of each hill, there shoots up from the middle of the salt a spring of water, cold and sweet. And about the spring dwell man at the farthest limit towards the desert. So it's talking about man in the farthest interior part of the desert. Okay, and when it speaks of salt, a hill of salt in the spring, it is referring to the oases in the western desert of Africa. Okay, that's what it's talking about. Then they have oases in what we know as Libya, oases in Niger, oases in Chad, Mali, Mauritania. All of these oases are scattered through the parts of Africa. And when the scripture, notice when the scripture says, I will scatter thee among the nations in the desolate land, it is talking about, these oasis region, that the Egyptians will be scattered all throughout the western desert. Okay, from the Nile River, okay, from the Libyan oasis to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, the multitude of Egypt, the great population of Egypt, were scattered all through this region. That's what Herodotus is talking about here. Okay, now, and he says, okay, there dwell man at the furthest limit towards the desert. Okay, he's talking about the southern part of the Western Sahara. Okay, and he says, for at a distance of 10 days' journey from Thebes or southern Egypt are the Ammonians. Okay, whose temple is derived from that of the Theban Zeus or Theban Ammon. For the image of Zeus or Ammon in Thebes also, as I have said before, has the head of a ram. Okay, so we see that the first inhabitants of this desert were the Ammonians. Okay, and we see here, we learn that it is from the Ammonians that the rest of the Egyptians scattered throughout the west of the desert. Okay, and they were all related. And as I stated, okay, here in book 4, chapter 2, okay, it says the Ammonians. Book 4, no. Herodotus, book 2, chapter 242. He says the Ammonians are a colony of Egyptians and Ethiopians. Okay, are a colony of Egyptians and Ethiopians. So the Ammonians were Ethiopians. Okay, and as I read, okay, and as I read before in book 4, chapter 197, that the people south of Libya or south of the Western Sahara were Ethiopians, and this included the Ammonians. But notice he says in book 4, 197, he doesn't mention the Egyptians. You know why? Because the Egyptians and the Ethiopians were one and the same. As I said before, the Egyptians mixed with the indigenous people of that part of Africa and became the Ethiopians. And that's why he mentions the Ethiopians. But they are one and the same. Now we have to read Herodotus with a third eye, okay? Because Herodotus is very tricky. Okay? In one area, he will say that the southern parts of Libya is uninhabited and desert. In another part, he will say that it is inhabited by Ethiopians. Okay, and we know that some parts were not inhabited, but there were inhabited parts as well. So you had uninhabited parts of the desert and you had inhabited parts of the desert. And that's what he is talking about. But it's still referring to the same location, which is Libya, okay? West of the Nile River, okay? South of the Sahara Desert. You're going to end up in Libya, okay? So pretty much southern Libya and western Ethiopia is the same thing. It's the same location, okay? So when you hear southern Libya, think of western Ethiopia. And when you think of western Ethiopia, when you hear of western Ethiopia, think of southern Libya, because it's all the same location. That's what it's talking about, okay? Yeah, but let's move on, and we're going to end it here in a minute. Now here comes the most controversial part, okay? Now, a lot of you are going to get angry about this truth, okay? Now, as I said earlier, they like to say the West. You West Africans have nothing to do with ancient Egypt, okay? But but we're talking about the West, right? Okay, are we talking about the West? Okay, you say West Africa. Okay, now when I read a quote saying the West, don't change up. Okay, don't say, oh no, West Africa. No, that's not talking about West Africa. That's talking about East Africa. So no, stop it. Okay, because whatever your agenda is, or whatever you're trying to push, is causing you to be a blatant liar. It's causing you to be a fraud. It's causing you to not accept the truth. Okay? I don't care what your agenda is. Okay? Whether you're a Hebrew Israelite and you want all black people to believe that they are the Israelites, so therefore this truth cannot be told. That's what you're pretty much saying. Well, I want to I want to let black people know that they are the Hebrew Israelites, but they can't know this truth. So we got to keep this truth hidden, because if they find out this truth, then it's going to interfere with them being believing that they are a Hebrew Israelite. That's what's going on here, and that is not right. That is falsehood and fraud at its best, and you need to stop it, because your agenda, your belief, is causing you to not tell the truth. Man. And your agenda and your belief will cause you to say silly, stupid things, such as the sun sets in the east, but it rises in the west. Okay? Because you want to push your agenda. And we know that that is a lie. We know that the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. Okay? And it will cause you to say silly things. Okay? Your agenda. Okay? And white people, your racism, in your belief to make black people believe that they are inferior and we have no history and we're not tied to the ancient Egyptians, will cause you to lie about the truth that's right there in your face. And that is wrong. That is wrong. That's why I don't want to have no part of these pseudo occultic organizations, because they want you to believe what they believe, and the truth does not matter. And I'm not with that. That is wrong. Our people have been lied to, have been kept down for so long. Now the truth must be told. Okay? Your agenda, your belief will cause you to tell a flat out lie. That's why a lot of you so-called educated or learned scholars, okay, who read this, but when you teach it to the people, you can't tell the truth about what you read, but yet you are so educated and so qualified. No, you're not qualified, because you're not honest. You have to be honest first to be qualified. Now, but let's continue, and we're going to end it off just a little bit here, okay? Now, when Diodorus Siculus, okay, we're going to go to the historian Diodorus Siculus, the ancient Greek historian who lived during the 1st century BCE. And he speaks of the Ethiopians. And in his book 3, he has he says a lot about the Ethiopians. He has a long writings, vast writings about the Ethiopians. And he speaks of different Ethiopians. But notice here, okay, in Diodorus book 3, okay, we're going to start. It says here in the intro, he says, on the Ethiopians who dwell beyond Libya and their antiquities. Okay, from book 1, on the Ethiopians who dwell beyond Libya and their antiquities. From chapter 1 to chapter 11. Okay? Now, let's read. And he says, here, later down, he says, they say also that the Egyptians are colonists sent out by the Ethiopians, Osiris having been the leader of the colony. Many other things are also told by them concerning their own antiquity. And the colony which they sent out became the Egyptians. But about this, there is no special need of our writing anything. Now, that's in chapter 2. Okay. Notice here he is speaking on the Egyptian Ethiopians, the Egyptianized, the Ethiopians who are the most Egyptian. Okay. And he is saying that, Egypt was founded by the Ethiopians when it was, and this was Ethiopia when it was called Kush. Okay. And archaeology clearly shows that the founders of Egypt came from the south, beyond the first cataract and second cataract. They were Southerners, okay? They came from the south of Egypt. They came from Sudan, okay? And that's what this is saying here, okay? But, okay, he goes on to say also, later on down, he says, but there are also a great many other tribes of Ethiopians, some of them dwelling in the land lying on both banks of the Nile, and on the islands in the river, others inhabiting the neighboring country of Arabia, and still others residing in the interior of Libya. Now, he says here that there are many other Ethiopian tribes, okay? Some of them dwelling on land lying on both banks of the Nile. That is talking about the Ethiopians south of Egypt, okay? Or northern Sudan that sits on that sits on both banks of the Nile. Okay, that's what it's talking about. A great many other tribes of Ethiopians, some of them dwelling in the land lying on both banks of the Nile. That's talking about Sudan, near Egypt, northern Sudan. And it says, in on the islands in the river. Now, when he says on the islands of the river, it is talking about the further south of northern Sudan, where the Nile splits into the Atbara River, the White Nile, and the Blue Nile. And Diodorus mistakenly calls these islands, but that's what he's talking about. He's talking about where the river splits further south as you go south of Egypt, south of Sudan, and the river splits into what we know as the Atbara, the White Nile, and Blue Nile. That's what he is talking about. Okay, because when the river splits, it looks like an island in the middle, but it's actually not an island. It's just the splitting of the river. Okay, and that's what he's talking about. And he says, and others inhabiting the neighboring country of Arabia, which is all the land from the east bank of the Nile River to the Red Sea. Okay, which will be the people of the Horn of Africa or Eritrea. And it says, and still others residing in the interior of Libya, okay, which as I had showed before, okay, the southern parts of Libya, Herodotus talks about that stretches from the west bank of the Nile River to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, that is what it's talking about when he says still other Ethiopians residing in the interior of Libya. Okay, so now which one of these Ethiopians is this referring to? Okay, when he says that, when he speaks of the Egyptian Ethiopians, okay, because from chapter 1 to chapter 11, he is speaking of the Egyptian Ethiopians, okay, and he says that they were the founders of Egypt, meaning they came from the south, okay. But notice he says, as I showed before, okay, as I showed before at the intro, he says, on the Ethiopians who dwell beyond Libya in their antiquities, okay. So he's saying that these Egyptianized Ethiopians dwelt in Libya. Okay, he's calling them a people of Libya. Okay, now we know that the founders of Ethiopia came from Cush in the south, but he's saying that their dwelling place is in Libya. That's what it says. I'm not making this up. This is what Diodorus says. I'm not saying it. That's what he is saying. So he said that it was founded by Ethiopians, meaning it was the founders came from the south, but he places their dwelling place in Libya. Okay, and we know that, as I just read before, Libya was to the west. Remember, the west of the Nile. Okay, and you don't have to believe me. You can go look it up for yourself. Diodorus, book 3. Go read it for yourself, and you will find out what I'm saying is true. Okay, but then he says here, when he ends the chapter on the Egyptianized Ethiopians, or the Egyptian Ethiopians, he says here in chapter 11, now as for the Ethiopians who dwell in the west, okay, that's what it says, the west, we shall be satisfied with what has been said, and we shall discuss in turn the people, or the Ethiopians who live to the south and about the Red Sea. So he is distinguishing the Ethiopians of the west from the Ethiopians in the south and about the Red Sea. And he speaks of the Ethiopians to the south about the Red Sea in the next chapter. But he is saying that these Egyptian Ethiopians, okay, who were the founders of Egypt, who came from the south and founded Egypt, dwelt in the west. So what is that saying? Is that saying that the founders of Egypt came from the west? No. It's saying that the founders of Egypt came from the south of Egypt. Okay, that's a historical fact that's supported by archaeology. Okay, the founders of Egypt came from Cush or Sudan, from the south of Egypt. But when he says that the Ethiopians who dwell in the west, okay, who dwell in the west, meaning their current dwelling place, he says at the beginning, okay, on the Ethiopians beyond Libya in the west. So what does this mean? It is saying that these Ethiopians who founded Egypt, okay, moved and migrated to the west. That's what it is saying. That is exactly what it is saying. Okay, their dwelling place was in the west. Man, wow. Okay, remember, you said it. West Africa. You come from West Africa. But when we read Diodorus, and we read the histories, and we read the Bible, all we hear is the West. Okay? Well, well, that's talking about, you come from West Africa, but that's talking about the West, but that's not talking about you. No, stop it. Okay? It's talking about West Africa. Okay? From the Nile Valley to the Atlantic Ocean. That's what it's talking about when it's mentioned the Ethiopians in the West, okay? Now, when it says the Ethiopians of Libya, keep in mind, it's talking about west of Cush. Not west of Egypt, but west of Cush. That's what it's talking about. From the west of Cush, from the west of Sudan to the Atlantic Ocean, Okay, that's who it's talking about. And so there you have it. There you have it. Okay, we're going to summarize what we just learned. We learned that according to the Bible, Pharaoh and his people will be exiled and driven away from the rich Nile Valley and will be scattered and dispersed into a desolate, wasted desert land. Okay, that is inhabited by wild beasts. And we found out from Herodotus that this land was the southern part of Libya, or all the land from the west bank of the Nile River to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so it's talking about the western parts of Africa. And we also found out that the people of this region, of this southern desolate region, were called Ethiopians. And we also found out, according to Diodorus Siculus, the Egyptian Ethiopians dwelt in the west. Okay? Oh, yeah. And believe me when I say there's more truth about this subject, which I reveal in the future. And I'm telling you, it's shocking. We've been lied to. Okay? So we found out that the Egyptian Ethiopians, those Egyptians who ruled Egypt, okay, who ruled Egypt, and those pharaohs and their descendants who ruled Egypt for thousands of years, made their new home in the west of Africa. Their new dwelling place was in West Africa. Yes. And when it speaks of Ethiopia as well, okay, it is talking about, when it says Ethiopia of Libya, it is actually talking about the Ethiopia south of the Atlantic. Yes, because the interior part of Chad and Niger, that region, that part of Ethiopia is not mentioned in history. It's unknown. The only two Ethiopias that are mentioned are the Ethiopia south of Egypt and the Ethiopia south of Libya, near the Atlantic. Okay, or the farthest west Ethiopians. That's what it's talking about. But the whole region was inhabited by Ethiopians. That whole western part. Okay. Okay, but the most famous and most celebrated Ethiopians were those in West Africa. Yes. So there you have it. Okay. The Ethiopians in West Africa and the Ethiopians in Siwa and the Ethiopians south of Egypt all come from the same origin. Okay. But the Ethiopians who had the most to do with Egypt, according to Diodorus, are those Ethiopians in the West. Yes, that's what it's talking about. Okay, so I arrest my case. Okay, the sources have been shown, the ancients have spoken, the lies have been refuted, the truth has been revealed. I arrest my case. The descendants of the pharaohs and the descendants of Pharaoh people dwelt in West Africa. And they are today the descendants of those slaves who were brought to America. Their descendants today are the Black Americans and the people of West Africa. Yes. So there you have it. The whole time, this history was being credited to other people that it did not belong to. But now you know the truth. Okay? Now you know that it belongs to the people of West Africa. The West. Remember, the West. Okay? I'm gonna hold that against you. So now let's go to some comments here. Okay. All right. So we're gonna go over a couple of comments, then I'm gonna cut it short after that. Okay. All right. Let's see here. see who joined us. Okay, Great Somalia TV. Let me just set the record. Let me just get this straight. Ancient Egyptians were colonists who were Somali, sent by us Somalis who established Punt. Now, yes, that is a fact. Okay, and I'm going to clarify that and answer that. My stance on that. Now, I always taught that the founders of Egypt, the ancestors of Egypt, yes, came from the south. So yes, the founders of Egypt came from the region near Somalia in the Horn of Africa and the land of Cush. That's where where the Nile River originates at. Okay, that's where the ancestors of the Egyptians came from. But the descendants of the Egyptians were in the west. And I will also get off into that later, and I'm going to show you why the Egyptians, the descendants of the Egyptians were in the west. Okay. And I'm going to explain briefly here. Okay. Now, the reason why the descendants of the Egyptians were in the west, because the west, because the Egyptians saw the west as the land of the dead. Okay, they saw it as the resting place of their old dead kings and gods. So they called it in their hieroglyphics or metanetter, they called it the Amenti, or the land of Manu, meaning the land towards the sunset. And they saw this land as the land of the dead, where the souls in the spirits of their gods and dead kings rest. But it was also a physical land, and there was also a living people that dwelt there. Okay, so some of you may ask, well, Radio One, what are you saying, man? What were you trying to say? The people of West Africa were dead, was inhabited by dead people? No. What I'm saying is the people west of Egypt, okay, and farther west, was inhabited by the living descendants of old dead kings or old dead pharaohs, and these living descendants of the gods. That's what I'm saying. Okay, the living descendants of old pharaohs and gods. Okay, because we are living, we're not dead. People in West Africa, they're living people, but it was called the land of the dead. And it's called the land of the dead because it was the land west of Egypt, and it was a land towards the sunset. And they saw it as a sacred land. Okay, a place of rest for their dead kings and gods. So that's why we know that the descendants of the ancient Egyptians were in West Africa. Okay, so we have to distinguish. Okay, we have to distinguish the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians from the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. Okay, now the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians were the founders of ancient Egypt. Okay, they founded Egypt. Before the building of the pyramid, before any pyramid, any temple, or any statue set along the banks of the Nile River, okay, there was no Egypt. So the founders who built that Egypt came from Sudan, came from the south, okay? And the ancestors of those people in Sudan came from the Horn of Africa, okay? The Horn of Africa in the deeper south. Those were the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians. Now notice when the book of Genesis says the sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. Now you have those who will say, well, these Cushites, they're referring to the northern Sudanese. No, it's not. It is referring, the original Cushites were those Cushites dwelling near the source of the Nile River, which is Uganda, in Lake Tana, in modern day Ethiopia. That's where the original Cushites came from. Okay, and they worked their way up north and became the founders of Egypt. Okay, that's what it is talking about. Okay, so in book of Genesis chapter 10, I believe verse 6, when it says the sons of Ham are Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan, it is talking about the direction or flowing of the river from south to north. Okay, in the indigenous Hamites, or the first original Cushites, originated from those regions. Okay, and that's what it's talking about when it says that the ancestors of the Egyptians and the Ethiopians were the sons of Ham. It's talking about the people living near the sources of the Nile River. That's what it's talking about. That's what you have to keep in mind. Okay. But later on, after the fall of Egypt, they went west. And we see, according to Herodotus in the Bible, those people, and Diodorus Siculus as well, according to Herodotus, the Bible, and Diodorus Siculus, those people were in the west. They were in the west. And when I say west, I mean far west. They went far away from Egypt. And that's what the Bible says, and that's what Herodotus says. Okay. So, and we know that those people in the west, in Mauritania, in that region, they also migrated south and settled amongst the people living along the Senegal and Niger rivers. Okay. And these became the Ethiopians, as we just learned. So pretty much. Okay. So to break it down, when we deal with the Ethiopians, okay, the Eastern Ethiopians, which are the Ethiopians south of Egypt along the Nile River, okay, and the Ethiopians of the Horn of Africa, those are should I say Eastern Ethiopia, okay, south of the Nile River and in the Horn of Africa was the land of the living. In the land of the Western Ethiopians in West Africa, okay, in Mauritania, Senegal, Niger, in that region, Niger and southern Libya, the Western Ethiopia was the land of the dead. And that is why you see no temples and no statues and no pyramids located in that region. Because the Egyptians, when they settled there, they saw it as the land of the dead, and it was forbidden to build any temples that represent the living images of kings and gods. That's why they built the temples and statues in Eastern Ethiopia, in Egypt, in southern Egypt, because that was the land of the living. But the land of the Western Ethiopians was the land of the dead. Okay, so you had the Western Ethiopians who had no temples, no statues, no pyramids. And you had the Eastern Ethiopians who built temples, built statues, built pyramids, and had great armies and powerful armies, was the land of the living. But yet, both of them were the same race. And the Western Ethiopians were descendants of the Eastern Ethiopians. Okay? So they already knew that whenever trouble came, they were going to follow the sun or follow Ra towards the land of the sunset and settle there. Okay? And there's a text. It is called the creation, the legend of Ra, and it speaks of the sun god Ra being the first king. And at the end of it, it says after Ra retired and after Ra reigned as king of Egypt, he journeyed towards the west and made his home in the west. So it's like, they followed Ra, they followed the sun towards the west, okay, in the farthest land towards the west, and they made their home there. Okay, that's what it is talking about. Okay, the Egyptians venerated the west. They saw the west as a sacred land. And when I say the west, I mean the west. I'm not talking about just the west bank of the Nile River. I'm talking about West Africa, the west coast of Africa, the real West. Okay, the West. That's what I'm talking about. So without further ado, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And now I'm gonna cut it short in a little bit. But yeah, see, no one has ever analyzed this and connected the dots. You know, they read the scripture and they just give their own theory and their own opinion without connecting it to anything. And what do you get when that's all said and done? Just theory after theory after theory, no fact, nothing certain, nothing sure, just theory from the mind of imagination. Okay. And I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that with me. Okay. If I don't know, I'm just going to tell you I don't know. Okay. And I'm not going to entertain it. But if I have proof from ancient texts, from original history that's contemporary with that time, okay, that's what I'm going to teach you. Okay. So there you have it. The truth has come out. Okay. So I see that there are no questions. Okay. I'm going to give you a little more time to ask some questions. Going once, going twice. Okay. Well, that's it. Well, the most important thing is, you know, you learned the truth. You know, you learned something today. We all learned something today. Okay. And I study this 24/7, and it brings joy to my heart to teach it to others. I love teaching it to others. That's when the exciting part comes, when I can teach it to others, you know. And I do my hard research, and you know, and I just want my people to know the truth. Okay. I don't care about what an archaeologist says. Okay. I don't care about what a world-renowned professor says. I care about what the sources say. And I'm going to tell the truth about the sources. Okay. Because your world-renowned college professor or archaeologist, yes, they can lie. They will lie their butts off. Okay. They will lie their butts off. And when someone who knows the truth approaches them, they'll run. Yes, I've seen it happen. Okay. And I confronted many scholars on this, and they ran. So we have one question from Great Somali TV. We have culture, language, history, etc. on our side, but the only thing they have is pseudo DNA. Exactly. Exactly. So Great Somali TV said it right. Okay. All of that belongs to us. Okay. That supports our truth. The archaeology, the historical text, okay, whether it be Herodotus, the Bible, Diodorus Siculus, you know, the steles or the stelas in ancient Egypt, the ancient writings, yet it all pinpoints to us as the descendants and as the rightful heirs of this culture. Okay. And it also proves that the ancient Egyptians were black like us. They're descendants. They were black, yes, and they are still black, yes. In West Africans, okay, African Americans, Black Americans, and West Africans, you are the foremost, you are at the foremost of this history. Okay, you have been lied to all your life, you know, and you have been, they tried to make it seem as if this had nothing to do with you, but when truth be told, this has everything to do with you, and you have to reclaim it. Yes. Okay. And later on, we're going to create a movement that grants Black Americans citizenship in both Egypt and in Sudan. Okay. Because we are the rightful heirs of that civilization. Okay. And we deserve the honor and respect from the modern Egyptians and the modern day Sudanese, okay, which we already have in Sudan. because I see videos all the time when African Americans come to Egypt and to Sudan, the Nubians there, they say, "Welcome home, Nubian brother." That's what they say, because they know that those people that dwelt amongst their ancestors, those powerful kings, warriors, and noblemen and royal elites that live in Egypt and Sudan were in the West, the far West, okay? We're in the West of Africa. That's where they were. And that's why when you come to Egypt, they say, "Welcome home, Nubian brother." And they are telling the truth, because they know that their lost kinsmen were in the far western parts of Africa. Okay? That's what they know. And as we just shown, history, the Bible, all of it, archaeology shows that. Okay? So African Americans, allow no one to tell you you have nothing to do with Egypt. Okay? And if they tell you that, please refer them to this video. Tell them to come here and get educated. As a matter of fact, tell them to come holler at me. They can leave me a comment and we can discuss it and we can debate it. Okay? And I will let them know the truth. And it is a truth that they cannot refute. Okay? So Great Somalia says, "Am out." Okay, keep the truth on your side. Yes, thank you, Great Somalia, for leaving your comments and tuning in. It is very much appreciated, and you have a nice day. So, well, with that said, I'm gonna wrap it up. Okay, that's it for now, and whatever we have for later, we save it for later. But as you just learned, okay, the descendants of the Pharaohs are the Black Americans and the West Africans and other sub-Saharan Africans as well. Okay, that's what we just learned. When you read the Bible, analyze it, and be honest about it, that's what you will find out. The African Americans, the West Africans, are the true descendants of Pharaoh. All of these fake identities that you're claiming, you don't have to claim them. Give them back. But this Aboriginal, Hebrew Israelite, or whatever, you are being led to believe what you are, give it back. Just give it back. You have the truth right here. This is all you need. You don't need that. And that's why you're claiming that, because this truth right here has been hidden from you. It's been hidden. It's been swept under the rug. And that's why you're claiming identities that has nothing to do with you. Because your own history and your own identity and your own ancestors has been lied about to you. But now you know the truth. And this is not the end. So with that said, brothers and sisters, you all have a nice and wonderful day. And until next time, Egypt stays in Africa. This is your brothers signing out. Oh, hold up. Happy Columbus Day from MITS. Happy Columbus Day to you too. And thanks for tuning in. But yeah, with that said, it's your brother Radio 1 signing out, saying until next time, Egypt stays in Africa. And until next time, African Americans and West Africans are the true descendants of the Pharaohs in ancient Egypt. Peace, Ma'at, Hotep, and Amun Ra. And may you all have a wonderful day. Peace. I'm out.